It's the Auburn Observer Podcast, the final game recap edition of a tremendous Auburn basketball season, the best Auburn basketball season in program history. It has come to an end, as the signs say around San Antonio right now. The road ends here. The road has ended for Auburn, and Justin Ferguson here in San Antonio, wrapping things up on the Auburn basketball season. Here on this Sunday night, you will hear it on Monday morning at the earliest, joined by my co-pilot, Dan Peck, who is finally back in Auburn, Alabama. But it wasn't an easy trip to get there.
Yeah, long, arduous road home for the Troy Trojans, who played a great game yesterday against Buffalo in the WNIT Championship. Sold out Alumni Arena.
Very cool.
In Buffalo. Nearly 6,000 people were in the house to watch it. I would hope it was a great game. It was a great run through the tournament for the Trojans. I'm happy to be home. I would posit it was on CBS Sports Network this year. I would hope CBS maybe takes thinks about airing the WNIT championship at some point on their schedule. I know it's the same day as Final Four Saturday, but they've got a big chunk of airtime earlier in the day. I think they showed a Serie A game or something earlier in the daytime. So I don't know. I would think it'd be, but that's growing, and that's one of the best crowds in my years of calling games with the Trojans. That's one of the best crowds we've ever seen. So yeah, it was very cool to be a part of this tournament, be a part of this ride.
Yeah, and Dan, as your season on the road coming to an end, my season on the road coming to an end as well. I am staying in San Antonio for a couple of extra days. Gonna catch the national championship game on Monday night, and then I come back on Wednesday because flights out of here on Tuesday were just insanely expensive. So should be getting back to Auburn on Wednesday evening. And then Thursday we have a little spring football rolling on into what used to be the 8A game on Saturday, which will be more of a free and open practice. We'll talk about that later in the week. But Dan, here we go. The Final Four recap, the end of the road for the Auburn Tigers. Florida 79, Auburn 73. I wrote about it in the observations on Sunday morning, Dan, and, having all day to kind of reflect on this, it really is kind of, cemented itself in my head about what happened in this game for Auburn. And I'm going to say that the thing for me was Auburn just looked like a team that ran out of gas in the second half. You think about the grind this team went through this season, the toughest SEC schedule ever, one of the toughest non-conference slates possible, and they had won so many games and had fought really, really hard all season long. And I think with a banged-up Johni Broome, a banged-up Chad Baker-Mazara, even though it didn't really seem worse for wear there, it just felt like Auburn kind of gave out a little bit in terms of having the horses to go all the way to the end. And heading into this game, I thought the reasons why, I didn't say it on the record. I don't do predictions a lot. But the reasons why I thought Florida was the move in this game, was the pick would probably be, not just because they were favored, but Florida had the best guard on the floor in this game, and he was beyond excellent. And they were a little deeper in the front court. And even though Florida's front court wasn't excellent in this game in terms of production, it was therefore against Auburn's three, basically. And towards the end of the year, Auburn got tighter and tighter and tighter with their rotations. And a lot of times teams have been able to do that in championship mode and survive. But I think the way Auburn wants to play, especially in this grind of a season, you saw that having 7-ish guys in your rotation kind of took its toll. And Florida just had a little bit more gas. And, of course, they had a guy who was playing on cloud 9, 10, 11, 12, whatever you want to say, with Walter Clayton Jr.
Right, and Walter Clayton Jr. Is probably ultimately the story of this game, right? Like if you look big picture at it, Auburn's turnovers doomed them to in large part in the second half. I think you're onto something with the idea that the team may have run out of gas, because it's not just about the grind of this season, right, Justin? It's also, you think about the miles accumulated by the different key players for Auburn and how much college basketball a lot of those guys have played, especially with the extra year of eligibility that a lot of them have been afforded compared to seniors from the past, right? Like there are, there's a lot of miles on the tires for some of the key players for Auburn, and in a game where the margins were extremely slim, in a game where these two teams could go punch for punch for an extended portion of the game, and even there was a time when Auburn had the advantage. It might have been those margins, right? It might have been those things at the end, and we speculated when it comes to, and we'll talk about Clayton too, but that Florida front court, we speculated that because they had Handlogden this time and they didn't have him the last time, it's not just about what he can step in and provide, it's his ability to keep the other guys fresh. Sure. Right? Condon and especially Hauk, who's been on fire since the first meeting against Auburn. Like those guys, because Florida can rotate them in and out without much drop off, that's you have to be at your best to hang with them.
And even though, like to your point, even though Handlogden didn't do a ton, and Alex Condon's had a really rough tournament, which is surprising that Florida's playing in the national title with that. It's 4-on-3 a little bit in this one, and when your three includes a guy that is dealing with an elbow injury and an ankle injury in this game and fighting through it, it has an impact. And I think you go back to the first half of this game, Auburn played phenomenal basketball in the first half. I mean, especially on offense, just super clean, efficient. They were getting a lot of the looks they wanted, even though they didn't hit the threes that they usually hit. We'll talk about that as well in this breakdown. But like the fact that they were getting really good offense and efficient offense in the first half of a Final Four game against an elite Florida team, I think said a lot. But also, it just Bruce Pearl talked about this. It's like it took, it was hard work to get to that point. It wasn't like things were coming easy. The results looked like they came easy, but Auburn really, really had to grind to get that point. And I think it just had that kind of effect where it just wore Auburn down in the second half. And when this team is not as deep as it usually is, and we can talk about that as well, and just kind of all the factors that played into that. When your best player, like in the second half, Johni Broome did not look like he did in the first half, and I think injuries had to play a part. He wasn't going to use them as an excuse. He's been a dude who's played through pain all year, but it had an impact. It looked like Auburn wasn't quite as sharp, wasn't as fresh. You see that in the turnovers. You see that in the fact that Florida's ball pressure really affected their guards in the second half that didn't in the first half. And look, we talked about it. Like, Florida killed Auburn in transition in the first matchup, and that was a lot of bad shots or rush shots or guys getting out of position. This time it was more kind of turnovers and Florida being able to take advantage of that. And when Auburn didn't turn the ball over, they were excellent on offense. When they turned the ball over in the second half, it got real dark real early for them. And I think the other thing too is, this Florida team's just built to make comebacks. I mean, they've done this. They came back from double digits down against UConn. Came back from double digits down against Texas Tech in even later fashion. And so when they erased that lead early in the second half for Auburn, it was just like you knew the run was coming. The problem was Auburn could not keep that kind of distance. And I think the combination of fatigue and mistakes really wore on them, and Florida was able to play most of that second half from an advantageous position.
Golden's made a lot of the right moves when it comes to assembling this roster, right? When you think about it, and as Florida, a lot of these guys were not necessarily everybody's idea of an all SEC caliber player or a starter for a national championship caliber team. We made that point about Auburn a lot this year, right? That this is an Auburn team that if you go back to what a lot of these guys were assumed to be coming out of high school. Right, when you think about recruiting profiles of a lot of these guys as seniors in high school, or even entering the portal, it wasn't necessarily these didn't seem like guys that were going to be high-level, major impact superstars. But instead, both of these teams, both Auburn and Florida, have guys that have really made. I mean, they have made. I mean, you think about Clayton, right? Like this guy goes to Iona. He's the best player on an NCAA tournament team at the mid-major level, and he parlays that into being one of the best players in the country and the best player for a national championship contender. A lot of that is the Johni Broome story.
Yeah.
Right? And when you think like with guys like Clayton and Broome in a more professional and in a lot of ways more cynical era of college basketball, those are really cool, dare I say, heartwarming stories.
Oh, yeah.
Right? The idea that anybody can cook, right? Like you can come from nowhere or relative obscurity and ultimately become a Johni Broome or a Walter Clayton Jr.
I think both of these staffs have been just beyond excellent at development. You look at, I think Florida's trying to become the first team in this era to win a national title without a top 100 recruit, like a former top 100 recruit. Auburn obviously has had their share of talent, but it's finding that Johni Broome, it's the Chaney Johnson, it's getting the most out of Miles Kelly, finding the Denver Jones. There's just a lot of those kind of success stories on this team for both teams. I think. In this one, and you're right, it is kind of easy to be cynical about this era of college basketball, but you can see how there's more than one way to get to this point, and I think, we may talk about it in a little bit more detail later, but, how crazy is this in a season where ultra experience was the name of the game, where so many guys got fourth and fifth and even 6 years of college basketball, that Houston – super experienced Houston pulls off a comeback for the ages against, a lot of 5-star children for Duke, and I think that's also, you could kind of see it in this game as well. You could see it in other games throughout this tournament. Dan, Duke is going to go down as the second best team of the KenPom era, which goes back to I think 97. Not going to play for a national championship. They spent the better part of 18 months crafting and developing and honing a roster around Cooper Flagg and maximizing what they could do. And for most of the season, they were a freight train. They were a wagon. But when it mattered the most in any given matchup, if you don't have quite the same level of execution and all that, a team like Houston, who's a lead in its own right, can take advantage. And I think, we saw it again, look at Texas Tech had Florida on the ropes, right? There was a stretch, Auburn was down to Creighton at the half. There were stretches where these teams have gotten to this point where it was they could be dead or things were not looking great. And it's not who has the most talent and who has the most experienced coach, who has the most NIL money, who has the biggest fan base and all that, who played in the toughest conference. It's just who's the better team over the course of 40 minutes. And unfortunately for Auburn on Saturday, that team was Florida after looking so good, early on. And, you go back to Clayton. I think the big thing in this game for Auburn, what it ultimately came down to, and some of it you can just say tip your cap to it. Some of it is you could have done better defending them. But, Dan, you look at the guard play in this game, especially shot-making wise, the difference is Walter Clayton was hitting contested shots and Auburn was missing open shots. And when that happens, it's just really tough to win basketball if you've got a team that's overcoming tough shot quality while you're not taking advantage of the better shots you were taking in that game.
Did you come away thinking Auburn could have tried different things against Clayton? That it was a matter of needing to make adjustments, or because he was, those were some tough shots.
Those are really
right?
tough shots.
It wasn't. That's it feels I don't want a Monday morning quarterback, right? When it comes to you should have tried this on as tempting as it is in the last game of a season to wonder what if. I wonder what other chess moves were available in that situation.
It's kind of, and you were talking about this with Johni Broome earlier, or comparing Clayton and Broome and kind of their paths. How many times have we heard people say this about Auburn with Johni Broome this season? It's kind of pick your poison, right? In the first matchup, Auburn did not get Clayton in the first half. They did not affect him. They did not bother him as much with his shot, and he got hot then. And then in the second half, as they were doubling, as they were trapping, as they were blitzing, he was hitting open guys, and Florida was just knocking down wide open looks. You go to this game, Florida doesn't have a ton of assists, right? Like Auburn's off-ball defense was great, and they were making sure, and they did it for pretty much the whole game, I thought. You know, Elijah Martin had his big moments, and there were some other shots from other guys in this game, but like it was kind of like, okay, Clayton can get hot, but we can't let anybody else get hot. And I think there's like the strategy couldn't be all or none there, right? If you just want to single up Walter Clayton with your coverage and just say, hey, we're not going to double him, we're not going to trap him, we're not going to leave open guys for him to create for like we did in the first game, he's just going to have to hit tough shots. Okay, he did hit tough shots in this game, and Auburn could have done better in making him uncomfortable. But Bruce Pearl said after the game, like, there was some in our game plan to do that. They just never really executed it. So I go back to something Stephen Pearl said to me when he was talking about preparing for, like, Danny Wolf and Vlad Golden and that Michigan front court in the Sweet 16 is, like, you don't want to be predictable. You want to be able to change some things up. You want to be able to switch it up, give them different looks. And I thought Auburn kind of stuck to the single coverage guns, which probably made the most sense in this game, given the circumstances and given what had happened in the first matchup. However, I don't think the other aspects of that game plan, the double and the trap and all that, if those were called and those were out there, as Pearl said, they just weren't executed as well. So I don't have anything – like the bulk of the way Auburn defended Walter Clayton, I think the intentions and the strategy behind it was sound. The results weren't, and you can't play the results at this point. You also just got to consider the fact that this dude – just did something that the last guy to do it in the NCAA tournament was Larry frickin' Bird, right? You know, he was the last. Walter Clayton is the first player to have 30 points or more in back-to-back in an Elite Eight and a Final Four game. He's the first player to have back-to-back 30-point games since Larry Bird, in that sense. So it's like at some point when this dude has got Chad Baker-Mazara, who I thought played well in this game, with his hand in his face and all that wingspan and all that length, and he's still knocking down shots like that. Sometimes it's like, hey, man, just that dude's on fire right now, and you did your best, and it wasn't enough. I think it's kind of a mixed bag, but mostly I just think Walter Clayton just beat you, and he is the guy to win those one-on-one matchups more often than not, and, you know, I think Auburn would be better off letting a guy go nuclear, to me, even with the results being the way it is. To me, I think you'd be better off letting one guy go nuclear instead of letting all of Florida's scope of talent get those open shots that they did in that first matchup back at Neville.
I think Auburn fans would understand better than most that sometimes you have a card that sometimes you have the high card, right? Like when it comes to, I mean, there were multiple times this year where Bruce Pearl would say the difference was that Auburn had 4. Auburn had Broome and the other team didn't, right? And so this time it was ultimately Florida had Walter Clayton Jr., right? Like that's if you want to find something among the really disappointing things about this loss to me is that if Auburn had won this game, if Auburn had found a way to win, I think the Chad Baker-Mazara performance becomes something mythological, right? When you think about this guy, especially in the first half, like
yeah, he's playing with a torn ligament in his thumb,
and he's hitting, difficult, deep, heavy artillery from the outside, and it's like that. I mean, and ultimately Auburn, Auburn's, Florida could take Auburn's best punch, for most of this game and answer back that.
I mean, think about it, though, Dan. Like, we said it with the UConn and the Texas Tech games, but, I mean, how many times has Florida come back like this year? I mean, South Carolina had them dead, and then Florida came back and won. Georgia had them dead, and Blue Cane had to hit a late 3 to give them that win. Like, it's just time and time again this season, this Florida team has just found that resistance because they are, kind of like Auburn, a team made up of a ton of experience and great balance. And on top of that, they have the best guard in America, period. And he's played like it.
And I see parallels between this year's Florida team and a couple of our favorite teams that we like to talk about. I mean, think about the 2019 Auburn team that went to the Final Four, the run they went on that culminated with an SEC tournament championship and a run all the way through the NCAA tournament into the Final Four. There were times when Auburn had guards in those games that the other teams just couldn't match.
Yeah.
Right? Like Auburn had some that could Auburn had the perimeter players that the other team just couldn't find an answer for. I would also think there are some parallels between the national championship team, the first Billy Donovan national championship team, and the way he was able to assemble, a bit of a pirate ship himself. Guys that weren't necessarily everybody's idea of impact superstars, and he was able to get them to be a maybe better than the sum of their parts, right? Like with the way they play. And I think there's some of that with this year's Florida team. There's been that with this Auburn team as well throughout the season. But I think you saw on Saturday night that with this Florida team, when they're able to play together and somebody gets hot, it's a challenge that a lot of teams can't overcome.
Yeah, and I think when you look at Florida, they had Clayton, who was excelling in these one-on-one matchups. I thought they had the deeper front court. You saw Florida win the rebounding battle in the second half. That ended up being pretty big in this game. But I think going back to the guard play, again, Auburn missed open shots. They had good looks. Denver Jones, Miles Kelly, Tahaad Pettiford had it, and they didn't go down like they had been for most of the season. Auburn's going to finish this season in a shooting slump from deep. But this was the best collection of guards they had in years. Didn't come up for them down the stretch of the game. But then, again, we saw them win in the Sweet 16 and the Elite Eight without shooting well from deep. And what did they do? They defended well. Obviously, Clayton made that even harder in this game. And they took care of the ball. 14 turnovers, 12 in the second half. Florida had 16 points off of turnovers. Auburn had 6. In a game decided by less than 10, that being the difference. Again, there's a lot of that you can just point to, that even if Clayton goes off, even if Broome's banged up, even if you're not shooting threes that well, you gave away too many easier opportunities with your own mistakes. Some of that's fatigue. Some of that is Florida making adjustments. And it's just Auburn just wasn't as clean. Again, I think they were, it was so hard on them to execute as cleanly as they did in the first half. They weren't able to keep it up for 40 minutes, and it really showed. And the end result is an uncharacteristic game, right? It felt like we had said Auburn's just got to be itself in order to win this game. And I think at times on defense they were itself. I think at times on offense they were one of the best versions of itself. But 14 turnovers, Dan, is not Auburn basketball this season. This was one of the best teams in the country at turning the ball over. So when you have something that far off the norm, it can be the difference between winning or losing.
And Florida landed a couple of haymakers off of live ball turnovers in the second half, right? That to me, and I, you were in the building, you could. I mean, I imagine those were moments that felt like, if Florida wins this game, you're going to remember, a couple of those dunks.
Just ferocious. I mean, just absolutely ferocious dunks. And I mean, you come away in a game where Auburn had 11 steals. They had their turnovers. They forced their turnovers. They weren't as impactful scoring in transition, getting out and running. Auburn played this game in the first half under control, half-court game. And, in this tournament, it's been very interesting. Auburn all season long has been one of the best half-court offenses in the country. Florida's half-court execution hasn't been great. They needed to get out and run. They needed chaos. They needed that. And Auburn's mistakes handed them that opportunity, on top of the fact that Clayton was hitting everything in sight. And I think when that becomes the case, it's just really, really tough for the Tigers to overcome. And again, I go back to the fact that Auburn had some catch-and-shoot opportunities. They did create some stuff on offense when they weren't turning the ball over in the second half. They had opportunities to hit big shots, to come back, to take the lead, to restore some momentum, to counterpunch off of Florida, and it rimmed out. Stuff didn't go down. Now, a few of their shots that they missed weren't great shot selection. The execution was not great for offense overall. You sensed some frustration and some fatigue setting in, like we said earlier. But, I mean, I think Auburn still got the looks in this game to hang in there in the second half, and they just didn't go down. And on the other end, the best guard on the floor, the best guard in America, seemed like defense didn't even matter out there for him.
This Auburn team was not easy to out-rebound this season, right? It might have been Bruce Pearl's best rebounding team at Auburn, all things considered.
At
right?
their best, they were really good on the defensive glass.
Yes, but I think a common thread in a lot of Auburn's losses, right, is that when you were able to out-rebound this Auburn team, you were able to put them in some trouble. And I think that's something A&M was able to.
I agree. Yeah. I mean, Florida,
but you had to have horses to do
correct.
it. Correct. Auburn only got out-rebounded.
Yeah, Chinley had an awesome game. I will say this though, Auburn finished this game with more second chance points than Florida did. Maybe the second chance points felt even more damaging or the offensive rebounds felt more damaging because of when they came in the game, right? And if you're trying to play from behind and giving up those extra possessions, even if they don't end in points for the other team, it works the clock. So maybe that's kind of more of it. But yeah, Auburn did a really good job on the glass in the first half, and they played really well in the first half. And I think Florida adjusted, their guys dug deep, and I just think the depth in that front court really kind of settled in. And even if Condon wasn't great, even if Hanglotten can only give you so much at this point, it's still kind of 4-on-3. And that kind of goes into kind of the other big point from this game. Bruce Pearl talking about how team wasn't as deep as they usually are. And I think Auburn's style, that's the thing, is you kind of, again, it's another pick your poison kind of situation. People had wanted Auburn to tighten up its rotations in tournament play in the past, and that had been something that people had said, hey, just play your best guys even more. Don't be quite as balanced. Don't play quite as deep of a bench. I think this season, though, it got a little too thin and a little too shallow for the time it happened. It had been different if Auburn hadn't played 38 games at this point. And look, the tight rotation worked to this point. Auburn's best guys were on the floor a ton, and it got them to the Final Four. In this game, with Florida having a little bit more in the front court, with Auburn dealing with injuries, you really started to see that sink in. And, it's tough, They didn't trust Turtle Hudson down the stretch of the season to give him that fourth man in the front court. Ja'Kai Howard had about as many DNPs as he did minutes played after the Tennessee incident. And so he never got that really that third chance, I guess, to settle in the rotation. J.P. Pegues, a guy who was really experienced and was expected to be the guy, it didn't click for him this year. And that's the thing about J.P. Pegues, I'm going to say. He's not alone in that. Not every transfer clicks at the same rate. You can find probably a dozen or more mid-major to power conference transfers this season that didn't pan out. Guys, it just didn't click for him at this level. So, Auburn obviously overcame it, obviously was able to do well with it this season with Denver Jones and Tahaad Pettiford. But in a game where Tahaad Pettiford struggled for the first time in a while, your guards weren't as deep as usual, and it had kind of that impact as well. And again, like I said, fatigue and just playing this relentless style for this long, this deep in the season, with some guys banged up, really caught up to him. So again, it's kind of a thing where Auburn overcame that most of the season. It really popped up here. Again, everybody can play Monday morning quarterback about, what you should have done. Should you have done this? Should you have played this more and more? No one had a problem with it when it was a winning strategy. It did have an impact in this game, though, and so that's going to be something that you'll have to consider moving forward if Auburn gets in this position again, and you would love to be in that position again, which means you had a highly successful season. You wonder if Auburn's going to be moving forward maybe a little bit deeper, maybe more to that kind of traditional Pearl rotation.
Yeah, and I think the remarkable thing about the Pegues situation is that Auburn was able to absorb it the way they did for so.
They played two guys who weren't supposed to be point guards at point guard.
It happens in college basketball where a high level transfer moving up a level doesn't necessarily work out with the team, but usually that'll deal a critical blow to a season if you. And I guess the comparison would be also in college football. right? If you put all your eggs in one quarterback and he doesn't work out, it's usually tough to just move on to the next guy, without speed bumps.
100%.
Right? And so for Auburn to be able to to go with Tahaad and Denver when that probably wasn't the plan for much of the offseason, and make it all the way to the Final Four before coming up just short against Florida, like that is another, if you're adding to the mythology of why this team was special, right? Like if you're adding to the things that made this season as remarkable as it was beyond just the win-loss record, it's what Auburn was able to do at point guard this year.
Yeah, I mean, I think at the end of the day, you also got to remember this is a college basketball team. It's going to have flaws. It's going to have inconsistencies. Guys aren't going to play the same every single night. Like, look, I had wrote the big feature story about him, and I hope it wasn't the kiss of death. I'm sure some people are going to blame me for that, but like Tahaad Pettiford had a phenomenal tournament and had been playing so very well. Didn't have it in this game. Does that mean that Tahaad Pettiford is a disappointment? Absolutely not. He's one of the best freshmen in the country this season. He's going to be a guy that I think a lot of people, and we'll talk about it, I'm sure, here towards the end, but they want him to be the cornerstone of next season's team. And he's got superstar level talent written all over him in the SEC. It just didn't work out for him in this game. And that's the thing about a single elimination tournament. When you get this deep, it's just like, you just got to be the better team over 40 minutes. Duke was not the better team over the course of 40 minutes against Houston. Auburn wasn't the better team over the course of 40 minutes against Florida, and that's why it's over. Doesn't take anything away from their seasons. Doesn't take anything away from who they were and how they got there and the strategies they used to get there. It just all didn't click on that last night, and now it's over. Period.
There might come a day when Final Four appearances are so commonplace with Auburn men's basketball that you can view a team that gets to the Final Four and fails to make it to the national championship game or fails to win the national championship game. Maybe someday,
yeah.
Right? There will it'll be like, all right, well, it's just another Final Four season. We're not there yet, Justin Ferguson, right? Like
we're not.
We're not there yet, and this this team gets to hang that Final Four banner. And I do think you probably need to keep whether you're a fan that was in empty Beard Eves Coliseum games a long time ago, or you're someone who just started watching Auburn basketball very recently. Like that perspective is probably important, right? That this is it's still a. I mean, you used. I think we both, in describing our basketball adventures this year, I think we both used the phrase "what a ride."
Yeah,
right, and it's
100%, what a ride. And again, you were talking about, Dan, like they may become commonplace. Like here's the other thing too: it's like making the Final Four is freaking hard, man. Like it is. It just is. Like, you can be disappointed at the way the season ended. You could be disappointed, and it could sting. Losing sucks. I know. I've seen plenty of Auburn fans here in San Antonio. I'm married to one. Losing stings, but the path to get here and the ability to get here is remarkable. I mean, just what they were able to do. Consider this for a moment. You talk about maybe it becomes commonplace. All right, so.
Yeah, maybe you become UConn women's basketball, right, over the next 20 years. And
I don't think anybody's coming that.
The final four seasons become interchangeable or something. But I don't, like I said, we're not there yet.
Dan, in the last 6 times that we've had a Final Four, right, Auburn has been in 2 of them. Okay? Only a handful of teams have gotten to this point, have been in that point, right? I'll put it to you this way. Kansas has only been to 1 Final Four in that stretch. North Carolina has only been to 1 Final Four in that stretch. Kentucky has been to 0 Final Fours in that stretch. It's been a decade since Kentucky's been back there. Okay? And these are the biggest brand names in the sport. So even if you have all the resources, all the history, all the pageantry, all the star power, all the fanfare, it's not guaranteed. What it takes is a special team getting hot at the right time, executing at the right time, living up to their hype at the right time, whatever you want to call it. And Auburn did that. And Auburn did that this season. And, I mean, it is a really, really special team that, again, timing is everything, right? Ken Baum has Auburn, I believe, is the 10th best team in the history of its rating system right now. The problem is that there were 3 teams better than that this year in college basketball. You can go, 25 plus, nearly 30 years at this point of those ratings, and you'd only had like 5 teams better than Auburn in that stretch prior to this year. Well, you had 3-4 this year, and that's tough. But I think it should also show you that, like, yeah, I mean, it took a lot to beat this Auburn team this year. It took special to beat this Auburn team this year because this Auburn team was special. And I think on Saturday night here in San Antonio, you saw special from the Florida Gators, and it was enough to get past an Auburn team that did a whole lot of special on its way to this stage.
Yeah, and it wasn't just that this Auburn team was harder to kill than James Bond, right? It was also that they took the best shot of a lot of really good teams along the way.
It was only
right?
the 4th time they were the underdog all season.
It's
insane. Auburn basketball.
I would say, and among the things where you're talking about the best ever, or like I would say it's the most ambitious non-conference schedule Auburn ever
Absolutely.
played. Right, when you think about the teams this team played in November and December, like it was the most ambitious and one of the more ambitious non-conference schedules by the numbers that anybody has played in the modern era.
I mean, them and Alabama were just in a league of their own this year with non-con.
I mean, absolutely. So you think about the way this team was battle tested. It occurred to me, like towards the end of the game, like. You might be if this is the end of the season, like you're seeing the end of various careers out there, including Johni Broome, who finishes his Auburn career with a very solid argument as the best to ever wear the uniform.
100%.
Like how are you going to remember like the Johni Broome era at Auburn as someone who was boots on the ground for every single game this season? And most of the games of the last 3. Yeah,
no, I mean, I think I want to say the only games I missed of the Johni Broome era were like the time the road was frozen at Vandy, and then like whatever the was it the Mexico trip 2 years ago? I didn't go to that one, but other than that, it was kind of,
and you were also at the Moorhead game.
Yes,
right. So I mean,
the very beginning.
So you saw Johni. Yeah, I mean, you saw Johni play against Auburn, and then saw practically every minute of his career at
I mean,
Auburn.
It's legendary. I mean, this is a true underdog story. This is a guy that did it his own way all the way through. Johni Broome is so old school. My buddy Robbie Callen, who writes at CBS. I was watching him on TweetDeck during the game. He was just like, he was losing his mind. And he was like, man, in the 1980s, everybody would have been tripping over themselves to draft Johni Broome because the way he plays is so, and it's unique. He did it his way all the way to the end. And it started at Moorhead State, and it went to Auburn, and he developed his game, and Auburn made him a focal point, and Auburn gave him the resources and the support and the roster around him and all that to just say, hey, come back and make it one more run. And he lived up to the hype. I mean, I went back and saw that I wrote a couple stories in the preseason after Broome decided to come back, and I was saying, like, what could it look like? What could it look like for Johni Broome to come back? And I noticed that, if you look at like stuff like PER, guys who would come back for one more year after these phenomenal seasons like the one Broome had last season, it's like these guys almost always are All-Americans. And conference player of the year types. And it was like, it's going to be tough to guarantee that, but that's where the ceiling is. And not only that, Broome exceeded it to be the outright conference player of the year, to be an outright champion in this league, and to win a National Player of the Year award, to be a unanimous All-American. These are things that Auburn had never seen before out of a player. That's the thing. It's like, and no disrespect to Charles Barkley, Obviously, one of the best to ever play basketball. One of the best to ever do it. No disrespect to him at all. No disrespect to Chris Porter or any of these other guys that have, or the old school guys, John Mengelt. Like, no disrespect to any of those. But Johni Broome did this in the best season of SEC basketball ever. Right? I mean, this was a record-breaking season from beginning to end for the conference. And that's the GOAT right there. I mean, that's the best to ever do it. And I think it may be tough, and it may take a while to get to this point, or maybe not. I don't know. But I think the next time you see somebody wearing next time you see a number 4 jersey at Auburn, it's probably going to be hanging in the rafters for Auburn men's basketball. That's the type of legacy he's going to leave. And I think, Dan, the other thing I'm always going to remember about Johni Broome, and just old school, just a gritty old school player. Here's another thing that I always remember. I watched this guy up close and personal suffer several injuries that would look like it would kill somebody like me. Just limbs bending and popping in weird angles and just brutal looking things. You made the Mick Foley comparison the other day. You just saw so much of that, and he's like, yeah, I'll miss a week. I'll miss a couple of games at most. I'll bounce back and play through it. And he played through it all the way to the end. And Saturday night after the game, he was distraught, super emotional, because it was over. The ride was over. He wanted a national championship. He wanted to cement himself as a national champion. And that's tough. And he went out like a warrior, dude. I mean, that's the other thing about Johni. It's just he went out like a warrior. And I know he didn't accomplish everything he set out to accomplish. But good grief, it's more than what we've seen from any other Auburn men's basketball player. And I think over the years, that'll stand the test of time.
And he got to meet Morgan Freeman, right along the way. Courtside of that one game, and the invitation still stands. If the invitation still stands, if Johni Broome wants to come on and just talk movies, right? Like we would absolutely.
You two could go horror movies. Like, he's a big horror movie guy. I can't get into that. I can't get into that ballpark.
So new horror movies are going to be a bit of a blind spot for me too, depending on which ones we're talking about. But I could give him some ones from the 70s or.
I think he's well versed in some of the classics.
Maybe he's a Hitchcock guy. I could see that. Yeah, he's. Anyways, but Johni was doing things routinely where it would be like, oh, this is the first time since Tim Duncan, or this is the first time since Shaquille O'Neal.
Yeah, I mean, right. And here's the thing, like the morons on social media and rival fans and whatever can say, "Oh, he did it. He played 5 years." Okay, where are all the
first name bunch of numbers has a hot take about Johni Broome being eligible for his
But here's the thing.
career.
Here's the thing, Dan. There's plenty of fifth-year players in college basketball. Where are they doing this? It would be something if everyone was doing this right now, or even no, he's standing alone. And so, I mean, just a remarkable career and just legend status confirmed, period. And he did it all the way to the end. And again, like I said, I know it didn't go out the way he wanted. But, I mean, people are going to remember this dude forever. And his name is going to be up with, like, Barkley. Like, think about it. Like, people are going to talk about the best players to ever come through Auburn, and they're going to say Charles Barkley, and they're going to say Johni Broome. And it's like, dog, you are going to go down as a player where they say you in the same breath as one of the best to ever do it at any level of basketball. And that's beyond special.
A coach told me a long time ago that, like, when you try to define winning culture, one thing, because that's nebulous,
Sure.
right? It can mean a lot of things to a lot of people.
Yeah.
But one thing he would always point to is, are your best players also your hardest workers? Are they setting the example in word and deed for everybody else as far as what can be tolerated and what won't be tolerated? And when you think about the way Johni Broome has worked to improve his game, even like the player he was a year ago, right?
Yeah.
Who could have, who had who imagine if he tests the market in the portal or explores or he had every right to explore the draft, right? But he comes back and continues to work to improve his game in different ways and minimize his weaknesses. It wasn't even about growing his strengths. It was about turning some of the things that he couldn't do into things that he was able to do, and by the end of his career, he was able to do them very effectively. Yeah. And on top of that, he was. I mean, you saw it up close that he's a mentor to a lot of these guys, yeah. Right? Like he's so including Tahaad, and in showing him how to deal with things on and off the floor. So I think that's an important part of his legacy, on top of everything he did that you can look up and see in the box score.
And you look at the rest of the guys on this team that it's over for. Just run through them here. Miles Kelly, man, you talk about the best example of what the portal can do for a kid and why it matters and like why it's a helpful thing and it can change somebody's life for the better. Like Johni Broome, you're saying maybe the best transfer ever. Miles Kelly is going to end up being probably the best single-year roster upgrade Auburn's ever had under Bruce Pearl, because and I guess Walker Kessler will be another candidate for that now that I'm saying it out loud. But just think about it this way:
does Jabari count?
Oh, he wasn't a transfer,
a single-year one.
But like, think about it this way with Miles Kelly. It's like he gave Auburn another weapon off ball, another scoring threat. And when we talk about how Auburn had its best offense ever this season, a big reason why is that they were now relying on somebody who was a certified killer on offense. Great three-point shooter. I thought his drives to the basket and his mid-range game got better as the season went on. He was a great defensive rebounder coming in. He got better as a defender as time went on. And he was another guy who did things the right way from beginning to end. And he came to Auburn, turned down an opportunity to go pro early. He came to Auburn because he wanted to win a championship, something he had never done in his basketball career. And he gets it, lighting it up in Rupp Arena and sealing it. And I know shot-wise, his numbers were not where he wanted them to be in this NCAA tournament. However, Auburn doesn't get to the Final Four without him because of the other stuff he did really, really well.
I would add that the game winner against Tennessee is going to be one of the legendary shots in Auburn basketball history, right? Like you're going to see that in highlight reels for decades as one of the great moments of this season and one of the great triumphs. Considering it's Bruce Pearl's former team and maybe the best incarnation of Bruce Pearl's former team that Auburn has seen in the Pearl era, and to beat them like that, it's you don't do it without Miles Kelly.
Nope. Denver Jones came to Auburn as a bucket getter, and he left as one of the best two-way players the program's ever seen. His development into a lockdown defender, national defensive player of the year, semifinalist, all SEC defense. It's a remarkable transformation. A kid who is a leader and an example to follow in every way. Again, two-way monster. When he got hot with his, think about the big shots he hit in this tournament. Then think about the defense he brought every single night. Again, these guys wanted things to finish better, obviously, in this Florida game, and he didn't have his best in this game, but even still, what a run. What a run from a player that, again, the portal, he got a chance to play in his home state for a power program after proving himself at the lower levels. And it worked like gangbusters, man. It was awesome. Awesome.
In an era where teams go out and try to assemble, understandably, like if you have the resources, go build an all-star team. We've seen some really talented teams that needed a Denver Jones, right? Like, oh yeah, you've got all these guys that want the ball and want to take mixtape shots, but who's gonna play Doberman defense?
Right? And take smart shots when they're there on offense, and run calm, collected offense, and do whatever the team asks them to do.
who's going to play unselfish team basketball on offense, practically every minute of his career that he's out there, and also play that kind of on-ball defense for multiple years and get stronger at that as his career goes on.
Speaking of guys like that, Johni Johnson. And as I record this, there was like some thought about like the Division II route being like guys maybe getting another year. There's a football player that sued, and as part of an injunction, he's getting another year, but that is not a blanket thing to cover everybody right now, so doesn't look like there's a clear path yet, but I don't know. The rules change every day. But if this is it for Johni Johnson, like it looks like it is, Division II to SEC key player, difference maker. Again, it's not a story that you hear very often. We talk about how Auburn's different and how, like you said, you want to build an all-star team. But sometimes you can just find really good value close to home from unexpected places. And he is a shining example of scouting, just hitting well on your reads of a guy, talent acquisition, and then development. The stats weren't always there for him, but he made a ton of impact on both ends of the floor for Auburn when he was at his best, and a guy that just will be as unique as you'll ever see. The fact that he is a Division II player that made it to this point, and also the fact that athletically and just strength and speed wise, did some stuff on the floor that just not very many guys are going to be able to do at Auburn.
And another guy where it feels like you constantly heard, teammates who acknowledge that they work hard would tell you Chaney works harder, right? Like Chaney was always being cited as one of, if not the hardest worker on the team. It's an amazing story, and I'll tell you, luck has very little to do with the Johni Johnson story, but there's a little bit in there in that it's a lightning strike that Auburn plays his Division II team. Because you wonder if he was on the radar before that game for Auburn, and you wonder if they hadn't seen him up close and realized what kind of athlete they were dealing with, if it would have occurred to them to go after him later in his career, right? So there is a little bit of it's incredibly fortunate. I wonder if they might have heard about Johni anyway, right? As a conference player of the year coming out of Moorhead.
Stephen Pearl said this week that they watched film all summer on Johni before they opened with Moorhead that year, the Jabari Walker year. So they already knew. And that when Walker Kessler hopped into the portal and they saw Johni head into the portal 2 minutes later, Steve Pearl was like, all right, we already know this dude. I'm going to call him up.
Right, and I wonder if that would have been possible with Chaney,
good question.
Right, with the level of competition he was dealing with at D2, but it happened. And it ends up with Chaney having to step into. Well, you think about the minutes Jalen played over 4 seasons at Auburn, right? Like this is, was it 5? Did he get a COVID year? Jalen might have played. Jalen played 5 years. And you think about the amount of familiarity there was at that position. It's a tough job Chaney had. Those minutes were difficult, and there were games, especially when Johni was out this season, where you wonder if Auburn can win without Johni Johnson.
100%. The story of this team is not going to be able to be told without two guys that were the least modern type of college basketball player, which is I'm not getting the playing time that I may think I deserve. I was a really good recruit coming out of high school, but here I am 5 years later playing a role and playing it well. And for Dylan Cardwell, he got that starting role. For Dylan Cardwell, he will be remembered, I think, forever, not just for being the dude who, celebrated every play he made like he was a professional wrestler, or the big dunks he had, or the big blocks.
I was going to interrupt and say, hacksaw Dylan Cardwell.
Exactly.
Right? Like,
it's not just for that.
I wish I'd thought of that before his career was over.
Yeah, he only played 100 million games for Auburn, and we never thought of that one. But Dan, the Dylan Cardwell legend is going to come down to this, I think, a lot. He stayed 5 years. He got that starting role. But at the very end of his career, he played his very best basketball all the way to the end. This tournament is going to go down as one of the most impactful from a single player at Auburn because not only did he play his best basketball, especially on defense and on the boards, in key wins, second-round game, Sweet 16 game, Elite 8 game, he played well, I thought, at times in the Final Four. The come-to-Jesus meeting, the dog cussing, whatever you want to call it, before the Creighton game, that set Auburn on a course to the Final Four. That was the spark. That was the wake-up call. And it came through him. And, he can be over the top sometimes with the celebrations. And, people, especially people who aren't fans of Auburn, can say if it's real or anything like that. Here's the thing. That dude was himself to the very end. And, they called him Cap for a reason. Chaney Johnson said it's not just that he's built like Captain America. It's that he was the leader of this team. Likewise, the junkyard dog, Chris Moore. Talk about a dude who was Mr. Basketball in the state of Arkansas. And his college career never quite production-wise, never quite got to that level that some may have expected. But he accepted his role. It evolved. His playing time would drop off, come back up, back and forth. He just did whatever the team needed to do. He's one of the few players at Auburn to ever play in the backcourt and in the front court and be able to bridge that gap pretty successfully. Look, never was an offensive threat, like a huge threat. Defensively, leadership-wise, communication-wise, being a great teammate, being a glue guy. That was Chris Moore to the very end. And, I'm always going to remember Chris as a personal favorite of mine to cover because of how gracious he was whenever we talked to him in interviews, how much I loved watching somebody who worked hard without getting any sort of real success in terms of statistics or notoriety and keep ticking. But I think the thing I'm going to remember the most looking back, Dan, I'm never going to forget being in that locker room in San Antonio and seeing Johni Broome devastated after losing and seeing Chris Moore come over to him, put his arm around him, and tell him, hey, dude, we're not here without you. We needed you at the very end. And it's the type of guy he was. And he had an incredible interview on the way out the door. He had a super emotional speech, if you haven't watched it yet, from Sunday afternoon when they're back at Neville. The JYD, man, stats did not ever show what kind of impact he had to Auburn basketball.
And with Chris, you can roll your eyes and think that it's hokey, but I think with Chris, it's like if you understand and appreciate winning basketball beyond like fantasy basketball, right? We're not just talking about the 5x5 Roto League stats. We're talking about like the things that you need to do as a teammate to win. Right, like Chris has so many of those qualities, and consistently, whatever his role was, he embraced it, with an eagerness to help in any way he could, right? And you saw it out there when it was time to dive for the loose ball, or whether it was time to battle bigger, more highly touted players at different positions. He was. Yeah, it's totally understandable why a guy like that is appreciated more by his teammates than maybe by the general public, and he's also somebody who can become a fan favorite over time because people start to recognize what he's what he's bringing, what he's bringing to the table. And as for, I'm going to say something about Dylan, but on Chris, do you have something you want to?
One more thing on Chris, and I'll kick it back to you, Dylan. I'll say this with Chris, and I haven't talked to him about this or anything like that, but here's my thought. I'll just say it here. If he wanted to go in this direction with his career, I think Chris Moore will be an excellent basketball coach. I don't even know if that's in his cards, if it's in his plans, if it's in his future, if he wants to go there. I think that type of dude he would be a phenomenal basketball coach if he decided to go in that direction. He's got all that it takes for that.
And as for Dylan, trying to sum up his career, right? When you're talking about the guy who broke the record, and because of the 5 years, probably permanently broke the record for games played in an Auburn uniform, right? Like it's tough to envision a scenario in an era of 4-year eligibility where somebody is going to break.
I guess
that
if they
record.
go to the 5 to play 5, maybe that changes. But even still,
but barring a rules change,
right,
though,
right,
that record's in pretty good shape. So it's like, I mean, I don't want to sweep the first 4 years under the rug or anything, but the first 5 years. But but with this tournament, it wasn't just the speech. But the speech is absolutely another part of the, another reason why this team is legendary. But I would say the matchups Dylan had in the Sweet 16 and the Elite 8 and the round of 32, right? Like you think about the bigs that he faced against Creighton and Michigan State to get Auburn to the Final Four. Like he was a vital piece of this team because without him, like you're really asking Johni and Chaney and potentially Turtle to hold the rope against some of the best bigs in college basketball.
Yep. Yeah, no doubt about it. I'll say this, there's 2 more we'll get to. Turtle Hudson, JP Pegues. Now, I know the roles were different for those guys. I think both of those guys probably did not have quite the seasons that they wanted, especially JP, but I think Turtle at times with some of the DMPs and the playing time being kind of volatile and how things kind of started out. I want to give tremendous credit to both of those dudes that even when things weren't going for their way for them individually, they still were locked in with Auburn and did what their coaching staff asked them to do. They stayed ready. They stayed locked in, and the individual accolades did not come. The individual production did not come. I think Turtle had that big game against Georgia that should be remembered, just coming off the bench and filling in. And again, Auburn, we talked about earlier, if Auburn could have leaned on them a little bit more this season, maybe things would turn out a little bit differently, but maybe not in that Final Four game. But it takes maturity, and it takes just some real character, I would say, to have things not go your way and still be a positive contributor to your team, even if it's not on the floor, and staying locked in and not being a head case, not being a bad guy, not doing any of that kind of stuff to negatively affect this team. And I think Auburn didn't have that this season, even from their guys who weren't on the floor and producing. And it's part of the reason why they were able to win a championship and make it to the Final Four, because this team stayed cohesive and had great chemistry from top to bottom. And Hudson and Pegues should get credit for part of that as well, even if the box score or the memories won't be the same for them as they are for a lot of the other guys we just mentioned.
There's something to be said for continuing to show up amid adversity and staying ready, right? And we don't ultimately know like what would have happened if Auburn had to lean on one of those 2 guys for a lot of minutes in one of these games. But the fact is, I think that by all accounts, they would have been ready to go based on the way they conducted themselves all season long, and there's something to be said for that. In a situation that maybe isn't going the way you thought it was going to go.
We didn't mention 3 other guys, 4, I guess, when you count A.D. Scott as well, who could come back for Auburn, and I read about it in the roster review. Tahaad Pettiford said on Sunday that he hopes that he can run it back with Auburn next season. Here's the thing with Tahaad Pettiford. Dan, we're smart people, or at least we pretend to be. Tahaad Pettiford's definitely a smart guy. He needs to see what his value is, especially when it comes to the next level, and make the best decision for himself. I do expect, though, if it comes down to it, Auburn is going to be as competitive as possible to keep him in place. If he ultimately wants to go to the NBA, he wants to go the pro route, there it is. And we'll see what the feedback he may or may not get from the league. However, I think Auburn sees him as a cornerstone of next season's team, and because the potential is going to be through the roof for him. And I do think, even though that there's nothing binding, there's nothing official, it may not even be anything newsworthy about what he said on Sunday afternoon. But, Dan, it is a good early sign that he is at least interested in coming back to Auburn. It's not a guy who is completely focused on going to the next level right now.
Yeah, and you assume, based on the roster that Auburn has been able to build the last couple of seasons, that they're well positioned in the NIL space when it comes to college basketball. Like you don't sign and keep most of the players Auburn has had these last couple of seasons if you are lacking in that,
right,
compared to other programs trying to compete at the high major conference championship
they might not
level.
They might not be the richest, but they're going to be competitive.
So I would think that if it comes down to a money or an opportunity thing, as far as, which program gives Tahaad the best chance to continue developing his game, I would think Auburn is, they're positioned to be extremely competitive against any other team in college basketball. Yep. Now, if Tahaad wants to explore the professional route, that's something different, and something that it's tougher, because then you're not arguing stay at Auburn. Now you're arguing stay in college basketball, sure, right? Which is sort of a different thing. And so, and we've seen examples of in different sports and sometimes in the NBA, guys who look like they could have solid draft position deciding to play another year of college basketball instead. But you're right. I think Tahaad needs to, he needs to find out. I think it's totally understandable if he explores his value and explores his draft stock before making a permanent decision about what he's going to do next year. But it does seem like a good sign that he's willing to put it out there that he wants to come back.
I'll say two things about Tahaad Pettiford here real quick. Number one, Tahaad Pettiford really likes being at Auburn. And that's kind of cliche and people get inside. But this is a dude from Jersey. This is a dude from Jersey City, and the difference between Jersey City and Auburn is pretty wide. But he talked about it during this week in San Antonio. He said he felt like Auburn and Bruce Pearl and this team and this school was the best for him. It was the best fit for him. He enjoys being here, and he enjoys being at Auburn. And we'll see how much that has an impact. But again, this is not a guy who is just completely star-struck on just getting to the league as quickly as possible. Second thing I'll say about Tahaad Pettiford is this. If it was all about money, he probably wouldn't have been at Auburn in the first place. That's my read on the situation. So keep that in mind moving forward. Chad Baker-Mazara.
Well, okay, on Tahaad, I want to point out too that the idea that the audacity of a true freshman stepping onto a team with guys this veteran,
yep,
right? When it's an online meme, the ages of the different Auburn starters compared to like the ages of the Washington Wizards or whatever, like when folks are pointing out how old these guys are, for a true freshman to be able to fit in on the court and off the court with these guys who are, I mean, they're not from a different generation, but in a lot of ways, when they entered college basketball, things were very different than when Tahaad Pettiford entered college basketball. So I mean, for him to be able to fit in off the court and on the court with these guys and have the willingness, have the intestinal fortitude to take those big shots as early in his Auburn career as he was willing to take them, and as consistently throughout this season. Like that's, we called him the moment, right? And that's because he wasn't just ready for the moment. Like that's he was the moment at so many points this season.
Maybe the third thing I'll say about Tahaad Pettiford here, he struggled against Florida in the Final Four. I think, again, fatigue, size. Bruce Pearl said he could have done a better job getting better looks for him and all that. He struggled against Florida. Don't overemphasize one game. Just because his final game wasn't great doesn't mean that's not going to impact his draft stock one way or another, right? It's a body of work thing. It's not just an individual thing, so keep that in mind as well. Chad Baker-Mazara's got a decision to make. He has a year of eligibility. He can get it. He can use it. I'm very interested to see what he ends up doing. I can see why Auburn want him back. I thought, he in pretty much every statistical category that, like the main ones, he was Auburn's second best player this season. He will be one of the oldest players in college basketball. He's done a lot. He's got a lot of miles on those tires, like you were saying. And next season is going to be a reset for Auburn. Now, it could be a very talented reset. It could be a very, very lucrative reset for Auburn. But it's going to be a reset. And I wonder, there's a lot of factors weighing in this. And I just wonder with Chad Baker-Mazara, does he go out with the guys he came in with, or does he stay back and try to help build that bridge and keep Auburn going? Only he can decide that for himself. But the door, as of right now, is open. Ja'Kai Howard, we talked about it earlier, the DNPs and all that. I mean, I'm not breaking any news here. I'm not making any official prediction. If I had to make a bet, I would say, this is not any inside information, I should say. It is a prediction, though. If I had to bet, I would not expect him to be back at Auburn next season. I think just the way the first season went, feels like a guy who might end up getting a reset somewhere else. We will see. But that's just the vibes I'm at right now. Obviously a very talented player. Obviously could have made an impact for Auburn this year for several different reasons. Just didn't happen. It didn't happen. And it makes you wonder if he's going to get that second season at Auburn, or he will take that second season at Auburn. But then, Dan, it's wide open after that. And I'm sure we'll talk about more about him in the future. I'm planning on, by the way, Monday when this comes out, I'll have the roster tracker going for basketball like we do every year after the season ends. It's the tradition. That'll be up Monday morning. Tuesday morning, Dan, I'm hoping to break down Auburn's newest pickup in Keyshawn Hall, who, by the way, was wearing an Ottawa Senators jersey at the Final Four. I thought that was a very interesting and pretty cool move from the new guy. I'm going to break down Keyshawn Hall. I'm going to try to do a full, like, what Auburn is getting in him, like stuff I've done in the past with transfers and new pickups. Real quick, though, I'm super intrigued by this guy. I mean, not only was he the leading scorer in the Big 12, positionally, he is a unicorn. And for an Auburn team that's going to need a lot of new scoring and a lot of new faces to step up next year, no matter what happens with Pettiford and Baker-Mazara and those guys, I mean, he is so intriguing, and that tape is pretty fun to watch.
There is literally no break for Bruce Pearl and the coaching staff, right? As far
they
as
got this dude before they even played in the Final Four.
Yeah, I mean, he would have. I'm curious to know, and I wonder that the next time we hear from Coach, but I'd be curious to know how much recruiting he was doing in the immediate aftermath of the Final Four loss, or even the next day, right? Like because you gotta. I mean, other teams are assembling their rosters. Your competition.
We know Auburn was involved with Flory Badunga again, and he ends up deciding to stay at Kansas. But we know Auburn was heavily involved there. Stephen Pearl talked about how tough it was to kind of balance out recruiting at this point with getting ready for the Final Four and all that, making this run. Big Yaks from UAB, Auburn was involved in there. And I think especially in the big men spots, there's going to be a reset coming here, and more guys are going to enter the portal by the day. I mean, not a big man, but one of the best players for Texas Tech just hit the portal. He's about to get paid, and it's like more guys are going to go in and go in and go in. It's going to be a long process, but yeah, I mean, it's just, I can't imagine trying to balance all that out right now.
Yeah, I mean, there used to be the thought of like, okay, well, you take your, you go to the beach or whatever, and you get a couple of, you get there's a dead period.
Nope.
No, not there's the exact opposite, right? Like it's a live wire right now where you better, you can take that vacation, but when you come back, there might not be the kind of players you're hoping for in the portal, and you're going to be seeing those guys, on other SEC teams this year. So it's right back on the treadmill for the Auburn for the Auburn coaching staff, and that's got to be in the aftermath of a game like Saturday's. Right? Like that's got to be so tough to. All right, well you gotta you gotta take your standing 8 count, and you gotta get right back in the fight. Like you gotta bite down on the mouthpiece and get back out there.
And that's the thing, Dan. It's like we have seen so many college basketball coaches fold or give up or retire in this new era. And it's tough, man. It's tough. There's so many different rules and non-rules, and things are changing and new stuff you never had to deal with. But I feel like Bruce Pearl, like Tom Izzo's done this as well, and heck, you're going to see on Monday night a national championship game featuring Kelvin Sampson, of guys who have just been able to roll with the punches and evolve and adapt. And Bruce Pearl has done a really good job of this. I keep thinking about how 6 years ago Auburn makes this, remarkable run to the Final Four, and it's like, wow, what is this great opportunity? They may never get back here again. They may never have it again. Then a couple years later, they have 2 first-round picks in the front court. And, okay, maybe this is the best team they're ever going to have. And, oh, wow, how disappointing is it that they didn't even get out of the first weekend? Then a couple years later, it's like, analytically, this is the best team they've ever had. And, look, they won the SEC tournament title again. And, oh, man, they can't even get out of the first round, and how disappointing that is. I mean, what are they going to do? And then, boom, best season ever right after that. And so, this program is built to last. This team is built to last. This coaching staff has evolved and adapted and reset and reinvented themselves, and they've rolled with the punches because that's what you got to do. They did a whole lot of punching this year back, and they're in a unique position to keep doing that. Like I said earlier, making the Final Four is hard. Winning championships are hard. It's not something to be expected every year. But success is becoming more common at Auburn in men's basketball than it's ever had. And I'll say this too. Success is more common at Auburn than it is in a whole lot of places in college basketball, including some of the biggest blue bloods in the sport. Don't take any of that for granted, right? Yes, losing sucks if you're a fan. I know it is. Like I said, I've heard and seen and felt all of your pain. I have gotten that over these last 24, 36 hours. But what Auburn is in this point right now is very, very special, and it culminated in a very special team this season, and there's potential for more special teams in the future. This one may be a one-of-one unique one because of the circumstances and that certain collection of talent and that last dance vibe and the all-in on experience kind of moment that they had. But, yeah, Dan, I just think this team is going to be one that this team's going to be one that is going to be remembered forever. But there's potential that there could be more coming.
And without any real idea of sort of, I mean, the futures are murkier than ever in college basketball because the sport is so year to year, and I think that's one of the things that makes this, the extended run of Auburn success over the last few seasons so impressive. Is the way new players have been able to cycle in and keep the standard where it is. But you don't know how long that's going to last, right? Because in college basketball, these things can, fortunes can change very quickly, and you're in the most competitive league in the history of the sport, and it's not like anybody has plans of backing down anywhere in the league, right? And I think, and one of the reasons why. I was having a conversation with Coach Rigby at Troy over the weekend about this, and Troy wasn't all that successful when she got there in women's basketball a decade ago, and she turned them into a consistent contender. And I think the feeling around the Sun Belt is, well, if you can win at Troy, a place that really didn't have much basketball tradition or history, why can't we win at in that sport? And I think Bruce Pearl has instilled a little bit of that around the SEC. Right, the thinking that, well, if it's possible at Auburn in men's basketball, considering the 50 years before Bruce Pearl arrived, where it was inconsistent, not barren, right? It wasn't like Auburn didn't enjoy any success, but it wasn't consistently at the top of the conference by any stretch of the imagination. To turn that into this, I think, has athletic directors all over the conference thinking, Well, there's no excuse. If we hire the right person, if we empower the right people, that can be ours too.
All right. We will put a bow on this by saying, for me, Dan, and then I'll kick it to you if you have any thoughts. This Auburn basketball season, I've wrote about it. I wrote the big thing before the Final Four that you can check out if you haven't already. Just kind of a personal thing about covering this Final Four. And look, I'm staying here at the National Championship game just because I want to be a part of it, even though I'm not covering it actively. You know, I got a ticket to the Final Four, so to speak, with my press pass. So to a national championship game. So let's take advantage of that. But I will say, like, this Auburn basketball season was the most fun I've ever had covering a team, the most rewarding I've ever had covering a team, the most demanding, just because of how good they were, and you want to kind of, with the newsletters and the podcast, meet that moment. It was tiring, man, and I've been all over the United States covering this basketball team. I wouldn't trade it for anything in the world. I mean, it has been an absolute pleasure. And I'm looking forward to covering this offseason and the reloading process coming. Not rebuild. I think it's reload at this point. Auburn's nowhere near rebuilding. But I ran the numbers today, Dan. And I'm willing to say this on the air. I don't usually like to talk numbers a ton. But from the start of basketball season to now, to the end of this ride, the Auburn Observer has picked up almost 250 new paid subscribers. And what that has communicated is that covering this team the way that we do is not only the right thing to do, it's also the smart thing to do in terms of running a business, paying the bills, so on and so forth. So, if you're one of those people who joined on, thank you very much for joining us. If you've been one of these people who've been on for a while, or all the way since day one, thank you for being there and continuing support. And if you're out there just listening, and you just listen to the free podcast, thanks for hanging with us. We appreciate you guys as well. But again, this, in a way, has been a life-changing season of covering a team for me. And I thank all of you for it. Thank you for getting to this point. And, again, they're not listening to this, I don't think. I know some people read from time to time, but Bruce Pearl, his staff, his players, everyone involved in Auburn basketball, thank you for being as accessible as you are and as fun to cover as you are, because it takes a level of cooperation, and it takes a level of respect, and it takes a level of understanding each other to get the kind of coverage and to allow us to have the kind of coverage that we have of this remarkable team, of this special team, of this legendary, historic Auburn basketball team. And the personalities, the moments, the games, the highs, the lows, all tremendous. And, all I got to do is just sit back and witness history and record it for everybody else. And not only was it a blast to do, and as time-consuming as it can be, it wasn't that hard to do because of the people who make up Auburn basketball. And so, thank you guys as well. Dan, final thoughts.
My experience covering this year's team was different than yours because of my schedule, but I was able to go to a couple of games as well, and I want to echo your gratitude and extend my deepest thanks to Coach Pearl and everyone. A lot of folks don't get mentioned by name, right? But everyone who helps keep this machine running, everyone who keeps the train on the tracks, and I'll mention Marlene. right?
Absolutely.
Marlene absolutely deserves a shout out by name, among so many other people who
Yep.
are such an important part of that, and maybe don't get recognized publicly all that often. I want to congratulate Andy Burcham on a phenomenal season and the work he's doing again this year. You talk about meeting the moment, right? Like I am, and I've mentioned this on other episodes too, and it's not just because I want to brag that
Absolutely.
Andy Burcham texts me or anything, but like the fact that he's
Hey, he's a subscriber. He listens to every
the fact that
episode.
Andy Burcham.
He reads every newsletter. I
and
know
the fact
that for a
he's
fact.
the kind of guy, the week of a Final Four game, who's willing to reach out to me and tell me about a cool Italian restaurant in Normal, Illinois, because he knows the Troy Trojans are in the Fab Four playing on the road at Illinois State. Like it's not out of character for him to do stuff like that.
No.
And so that's got very little to do with how phenomenal he is as a play-by-play guy, and the way he brings it every single time. And so I want to say, look, it's got very little to do with my friendship with him. Andy Burcham is such a credit to this university and to this basketball program, and did an incredible job this season. And so I want to congratulate him on the show for that. And
Well, I'll add on to that. Coach
Yes.
Randall Dickey stepping in, I want to say, one of the toughest seats to fill in Auburn basketball history is replacing the legendary Sonny Smith as the color commentator for the radio calls. That is a hard job, because that dude, of course, is one of the best to ever do it. So beloved. Coach, being able to be around Randall this season on these road trips and talking with him, and just the stories he has of a guy who spent his time coaching in junior college and on the West Coast and the mid-majors and in the Big 12 and just all over the country, and the stories he has, the insight and the X's and O's and the detail he brings to those calls. That's a tough assignment to fill, and he did an excellent job with it as well. And that combo of Andy and Randall was excellent. Was excellent. And I'm glad that when people go back and watch footage of this season, it's going to be soundtracked by those two guys.
And you're right. You're absolutely right. And I want to. Coach Dickey, who, by the way, would be a great guest. Maybe we might need.
Oh,
we should,
good.
Yeah, we should talk.
You could do like a 4-hour PPE with him. I know you could.
I think I'd want you on the line too for this one, though. I wonder if this is just a bonus observer sometime, not the fantasy book like future episodes of this podcast here towards the end. But no, you're right.
We got a long off season.
Randall did a great job, and yeah, it's because of the job Sonny Smith did for so many years. It was a difficult seat to difficult seat to fill, but Randall did a tremendous job, and something else, Justin, like there were, this was a season where I think we had some friends who put out some top tier coverage about Auburn basketball too. Right, like not. It's we got some, and you had some folks there at the Final Four right there alongside you, and I thought that it was like this was a season where we got some we got some tremendous coverage from different outlets about this Auburn team. Getting back to the access that the program provides the media, like there were so many incredible stories out there. Whether it's Pepe. Right, whether it's Nathan.
Let's run them down, because here's the thing: if you're new to the Observer, we do our thing, and we know we don't do everything, and we love to shout out and give credit to our friends on the beat and the colleagues on the beat who do such an excellent job. And on the written word side, just shouting out our colleagues on that end. Let's start. 247 Auburn Undercover. Our buddy Nathan King. Excellent job from beginning to end this season. Philip Marshall, the GOAT, was here for the postseason run. Ready to see him. Jason Caldwell filling in with his insight from time to time. You had Patrick Bingham, their intern, do just incredible stuff on the video and the graphics side. Continuing on, our friends at the OA News, Justin Lee with his columns, Henry Patton becoming the ball knower and the basketball guy was one of the coolest things to see over the course of this season. His stuff is tremendous. Jacob Waters doing a great job as well. Adam Sparks, the killer photographer. Dan, I don't know if you saw it. He had the wide-angle shot from the top of the Alamo Dome with the Final Four court. I'm getting that printed and framed and putting it in my office. Like, I have to have that. Incredible stuff there. Continue on. Adam Cole, Montgomery Advertiser. I mean, come on. What else can you say about Peppy Boy?
Can we say real quick, Justin Lee got married mid-season and was still cranking out, like
still kicking,
and he wrote something on his top secret Twitter page that he shared a post that I think I totally agree with, which is often it would be tough to put how you feel about an Auburn game into words, and Justin Lee would hit it right on the bullseye, right? Like he would find a way to sum it up perfectly, and yeah, big shout out to our buddy Jay Lee.
The Peppy Boy, Adam Cole, by the way, great guest, great friend. I mean, I'll tell you, all these people that I've mentioned so far, they've helped out the Observer a ton, letting me travel with them. It means a ton, and their friendship means so much. Adam had some incredible feature stories this year for this basketball team that you need to check out if you haven't already. It's a great way to cover the story. Over at Rivals,
who had the story about the Legos? Was that Adam, right?
That was Adam and Miles Kelly. Yeah, of course it was.
How about the Legos,
huh? Over at Rivals with J.G. Tate, who's a presence at basketball practices all the time. Guy who knows his ball for sure. Brian Matthews.
I want to have JG on the PPE, and we're just going to talk '90s music. I think it's just going to be a '90s. I'll let him drive even. But that's the dream. That's the dream with JG, who's been such an important part of the Auburn beat for
a very long time.
Such a long time.
Not calling him old. He's just been doing this. He's just been doing this really well for a long time.
Entirely. Well, mostly we're being respectful when we say that about JD.
I'm being respectful. Let's be clear about that. But yeah, Brian Matthews, Brian Stoltz. They added Daniel Locke this season as well. They all did an excellent job with their coverage over at Rivals and keeping the bunker sane during basketball season. Justin Hokanson over at On3, guy who knows his stuff, does a ton of really good reporting on Auburn basketball and Auburn football for that matter too. But just does tremendous work with Auburn basketball from beginning to end. Am I missing anybody? I don't think I'm missing anybody.
That was my.
Wait, hold on. And then, hey, shout out to our friends at AL.com. Peter Rauderkus, Jerry Humphrey. Those two guys, I mean, that is the NBA Jam duo of AL.com writers there. Love hanging out with those guys. Love the work they do, the energy, the fresh ideas. They're newer to the beat than a lot of these people we've talked about. They've been a whole lot of fun to cover basketball season with. Shout out to them. Just two really good dudes that I am really excited to see what else they continue to crank out. Not just on the Auburn beat, but in their future careers, because both of those dudes have the juice for sure. So, been a phenomenal season. So many people to thank. And like I said, we started the thank yous with this. Thank you if you're listening, if you're reading, if you're subscribing. You made it all possible, and couldn't have done any of it without you. Dan.
Hey, are you a jinx guy? Are you superstitious much when it comes to sports or anything? Because
can I tell you the one thing I did this year, jinx wise, superstitious wise. So there was a moment earlier this season where Bruce Pearl mentioned my hat that I was wearing. I had gotten a new Braves hat, and he had said he had liked it, and he kept track of my hats at some point. And just kind of was noticing the hats, and I changed it up. my hats became a running thing during basketball season of which hats I was wearing to what games and what was happening because of it. I will say, every hat I wore this season took a loss at some point. So, they were not. However, I will say this. My wife, who is a passionate Auburn fan, was there in Atlanta and is here at the Final Four with me. She noticed that the hat that I'm wearing right now, Dan, this black and white Braves hat and kind of like the old 90s like Mitchell and Ness style, that one had not taken a loss pre-NCAA tournament. And this one was there for all 4 of Auburn's wins. It took a loss on Saturday night, but it was just a little thing. Again, it doesn't matter. I hate when people could say that I'm a jinx when I tweet something or whatever. But I will say, and you can call me out for whatever you want, but I was just trying to make my wife happy, who's an Auburn fan. I did wear this hat, and this got a lot of wins. But here's the thing. Got a lot of wins out of a lot of hats this season for Auburn because they did a whole lot of winning.
There was a time when I would, I would not want to get a haircut or a shave during a winning streak. It's like,
Sure.
like I guess.
Yeah, the playoff beard.
I think that started, the old St. Louis Blues fan in me, whatever. But it's like entirely from the NHL video game, playing with Brett Hull back in the day. But I.
Not the not the Hartford Whalers.
No. Although, love the song, but I was a Blues guy. You had Hull and you had Al McInnes, who had the best slap shot in the game. So you could go with those guys. I'm not really a jinx guy either. I probably should have kept track of like the win-loss record of my various scarves for the for the Trojans. And by the way, it is funny that like we both, like, you have your game day hat, I have a game day scarf. I started that this year.
Sure.
I guess we are like hat and scarf could become like that's the if our Siskel and Ebert type show is going to be the hat and the scarf. But
to be clear, I wear a hat because I don't like brushing my hair.
I
be very honest about that.
I wear a scarf because I don't like wearing neckties, and I thought a scarf was like a little bit.
I'm with you, man. I feel like I hate ties.
I'll take a scarf over a necktie if I want to class up my attire with some neckwear.
All right, enough jinx talk, Dan. Let's wrap up the only way we know how to wrap something up. You've been on the road. I've been on the road. You're back in Buffalo. I'm in San Antonio for the first time. Food spots. I know you were in Buffalo earlier this season. Have we had a standout meal? You talked about the Andy Burcham wreck in Illinois, but Buffalo. What do we got in Buffalo?
Buffalo is this time. I'll tell you about the city of Buffalo, Justin. The first time we went, we stayed right off campus, which is sort of the northeast corner of Buffalo, the Amherst area. For this trip, we stayed downtown. And it was a much different experience. A lot of really cool architecture's been preserved from the 1800s. There are multiple presidents from American history who have ties to the Buffalo area. Grover Cleveland was the mayor of Buffalo. McKinley lived in Buffalo for a period. I believe Teddy Roosevelt lived in Buffalo for part of his life. So I mean, it's got a place in American history with a couple of key figures, and so it was neat to go around and see some of the history that's still there in the city of Buffalo, which I didn't know all that much about before I made my visit. I also got to explore a couple of delis, couple of like the Ted's Hot Dogs is a thing in Buffalo that's been around, because I hit the wings and I hit the beef on weck last time, although I really do appreciate the Observer folks who have shouted out different places for key Buffalo cuisine. But Ted's Hot Dogs downtown, man, I was able to you're talking old school New York flat top dogs, and I did okay for myself wandering in there during my travels.
San Antonio, I'm here for a couple more days before heading back. So there's still time. I haven't got barbecue yet. Dan, 90% of my meals in this city have been Mexican food.
That's the way to do it.
I feel like that's the right way to go. I went to Mi Tierra, which is this really old Tex-Mex place that has a bakery in the front, a panaderia, I've probably just butchered that pronunciation. But I had incredible fajitas, like probably the best tortillas I've ever had in my life were at this place. And Dan, it was so good that 2 nights later we were trying to figure out where to eat, and I was like, well, we can just go back to that place. And we did. And had a different group with me that time, and it was excellent. I want to shout out, though, because this was an Observer subscriber recommendation, specifically, in the comments of a post I had. There's this place called Texan Sizzle right by the Alamo. By the way, the Alamo is really small. I didn't know that. There's this place called Texan Sizzle, and it's like open for breakfast and lunch. And it's like, the best way I can describe it, Dan, it's like this little room with a grill, and what they're basically doing is like a Texas version of Waffle House. And what I mean by that is it's breakfast tacos, quesadillas, burgers, cheesesteaks, sandwiches, that kind of stuff. Had really good hash browns, too. I went like in the middle of the day today, and I got 2 carne guisada breakfast tacos and some hash browns that I'm telling you, Dan, stupendous. I love carne guisada. I love tortillas. I love San Antonio's food. This place is incredible.
It wasn't quite visiting Canada, Justin, but I do want to also point out I did hit Tim Hortons both times when I was up there in Buffalo.
Timmy's. Have I informed you that there is a Tim Hortons between Auburn and Atlanta?
Yeah, out of nowhere, right? I look at it the same way I view like In-N-Out burgers that are east of Dallas or something, right? But I'm
like, what are you doing here?
As long as you lend a hand, you can sit around and wait for the phone to ring. Waiting for someone to tell you everything. Sit around and wonder what tomorrow will bring. Maybe down